High Commander Zekthal stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to witness another human failure. The massive armada spread out in perfect formation, 800 ships from 12 different species, representing the largest military force ever assembled for a single operation. Collective forces are responding as predicted, reported his tactical officer. Their orbital defense grid is powering up and their ships are moving into interception formation. Zekthal nodded grimly. He had seen this pattern before. The collective would adapt to whatever tactics the fleet employed, turning the humans' sophisticated battle plans into elaborate suicide missions. In 6 hours, most of those 12,000 human soldiers would be dead, and the Council would be forced to write off another failed rescue attempt. But on the planet's surface, something unprecedented was happening. Master Sergeant Diana Walsh crouched in the ruins of what had once been a collective checkpoint, watching through her scope as enemy patrols searched frantically for an enemy they couldn't find. For 2 weeks, her green Berets had been teaching local resistance fighters everything they knew about guerrilla warfare, and the results exceeded even her expectations. "Checkpoint 7 is down," came the quiet voice of Sergeant Miller through her earpiece. 43 collective soldiers neutralized. No friendly casualties. Copy that. Phoenix team, what's your status? Checkpoint 12 eliminated. The locals are getting scary good at this, Sergeant. They know every hiding place, every escape route, every weakness in collective patrol patterns. Walsh smiled as she watched a group of farmers who had transformed themselves into highly effective insurgents over the past 14 days. The collective soldiers, despite their superior technology, were completely unprepared for an enemy that struck without warning, and then melted back into a population that looked exactly like every other civilian. All teams. "This is Control," came Colonel Stone's voice from orbit. "Council fleet engagement begins in 30 minutes. Execute Phase 3. Phase 3 had been the most audacious part of the plan. While the collective orbital forces focused on the incoming fleet battle, human special operations teams would simultaneously strike every major installation on the planet's surface. But they wouldn't be fighting alone, in underground bunkers scattered across 6 continents. Thousands of local civilians had spent 2 weeks learning from the galaxy's most elite soldiers. They had learned how to make improvised explosives from farming chemicals, how to coordinate attacks using encrypted communications, and most importantly, how to think like insurgents rather than victims. Lieutenant Tom Mitchell's SEAL team had spent those 2 weeks mapping the collective's underwater installations, discovering a network of supply depots and communication centers that the enemy believed were completely secure. As the orbital battle began, Mitchell and his team emerged from the planet's purple oceans like vengeful spirits, striking targets that the collective had never imagined were vulnerable. "Underwater supply depot Alpha is gone," Mitchell reported. "They stored enough equipment down here to outfit an entire army." "Not anymore." "Copy, Mitchell." "Harrison, what's your status?" Commander Jake Harrison's voice crackled through the communication system from deep beneath the planet's largest city. "We've got control of the collective's main communication hub. Turns out their impregnable underground bunker has a weakness. They built it next to the city's old sewer system. Amazing what you can accomplish with a few explosives and some very unhappy locals who know every tunnel in the city." Above them, the orbital battle was proceeding exactly as the collective expected. The Council fleet launched wave after wave of attacks, each one more sophisticated than the last, and the collective's adaptive defenses responded precisely as they had during previous engagements. Their ships analyzed the Council's tactics, identified patterns, and deployed countermeasures that turned each assault into a massacre. "Human losses are mounting," Zekthal's tactical officer reported. "Their flagship has taken severe damage. Estimated casualties are approaching 4,000 soldiers." But something was wrong. The collective forces that should have been coordinating their orbital defenses were inexplicably silent. Their ground-to-space communications were full of static and confusion. Most puzzling of all, their orbital defense platforms were reporting system failures that made no tactical sense. On Kepler 442b's surface. Master Sergeant Walsh was orchestrating what would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as the perfect example of asymmetric warfare. Every collective garrison, every checkpoint, every supply depot was under simultaneous attack by enemies who appeared out of nowhere, struck with devastating effectiveness, and then vanished back into a population that provided perfect concealment. Collective ground forces are in complete disarray, reported Major Lisa Park as her Delta Force team eliminated another command post. They're trying to respond to 17 different crisis situations at once. Their commanders can't coordinate because we've taken out their communications network. Their soldiers can't retreat because the locals have blocked all the roads. And they can't call for orbital support because Harrison's people have jammed their uplink systems. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Colonel Stone had been studying collective tactics for months, and he had identified their greatest weakness. They were completely dependent on technological superiority and predictable enemy behavior. They had never faced an enemy that used the environment itself as a weapon, that turned civilian populations into intelligence networks, and that struck simultaneously from directions that conventional military thinking said were impossible. All ground teams. Execute Phase 4. Stone ordered Phase 4 was the psychological warfare component that would break the collective's will to fight. Every human team had been equipped with captured collective communication devices, and they began broadcasting on the enemy's own frequencies. "Attention collective forces," Master Sergeant Walsh announced in the alien's own language, which she had learned by interrogating captured prisoners. "You are surrounded by an enemy you cannot see, cannot predict, and cannot defeat. Your orbital support is gone. Your communications are compromised. Your supply lines are cut. But we are not unreasonable. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the galactic conventions of war." The message was repeated simultaneously by 12,000 human soldiers spread across an entire planet, each one speaking from a position that should have been impossible to reach, offering terms that should have been laughable coming from such a small force. The psychological impact was devastating. Collective soldiers who had spent their entire careers relying on technological superiority and overwhelming force suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered, outfought, and outsmarted by an enemy using tactics they had never encountered. In the orbital battle above, the collective fleet was beginning to show the first signs of confusion. Their ground forces weren't responding to communication attempts. Their orbital defense platforms were reporting system failures. Most disturbing of all, they were receiving surrender requests from garrison commanders who claimed to be surrounded by superior enemy forces. "This is impossible," the collective fleet commander transmitted to his subordinates. 12,000 humans cannot have neutralized 50,000 of our ground troops." But the evidence was undeniable. One by one, collective ground installations were going silent. Surrender messages were flooding their communication channels. And most shocking of all, human forces were accomplishing objectives that should have required overwhelming conventional superiority. Hi. Commander Zechthel watched from his flagship bridge as the impossible became reality. "Tactical, are you certain about these reports? Human forces have secured all major population centers. They've eliminated collective ground resistance across 6 continents in less than 8 hours?" "Confirmed, sir. We're receiving video transmissions from human ground forces. They're not just winning, Commander. They've turned the entire planetary population into willing allies. The collective ground forces are surrounded by 2 million civilians who are actively supporting human operations." Zechthel had fought in dozens of battles across 3 decades of military service. But he had never seen anything like this. How is this possible? 12,000 soldiers cannot defeat 50,000, regardless of training or equipment. "Sir," his intelligence officer said quietly, "I think we've been asking the wrong question. It's not 12,000 soldiers against 50,000. It's 12,000 special operations soldiers working with 2 million local civilians against 50,000 conventional troops who are completely unprepared for unconventional Warfare, the realization hit Zechthel like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just deployed soldiers. They had deployed teachers, organizers, and specialists who could turn an entire planetary population into a military asset. They had transformed a conventional military problem into something completely different. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Colonel Stone," the communications officer announced. Stone's face appeared on the main screen, and for the first time, Zechthel could see why the humans had been so confident. This wasn't the expression of a soldier hoping for victory. The transport ship Defiant Unity dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and Colonel Marcus Stone immediately understood why the Galactic Council had lost so many soldiers here. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, he could see the planet below surrounded by a perfect spherical formation of collective ships, their dark hulls absorbing light like living shadows. "Jesus," whispered Captain Rodriguez, Stone's second-in-command. "Intelligence said they had 30 ships. I'm counting at least 200. Stone watched the enemy formation with the calculating eyes of a man who had spent 25 years in special operations. The collective ships weren't arranged like any military formation he'd ever studied. They formed geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow, creating overlapping fields of fire that would trap any approaching force in a deadly crossfire. "Sir," called Lieutenant Sarah Chun from her station at the communications array. "Incoming transmission from Council Command." High Commander Zechthel appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features grim. "Colonel Stone, I want to be clear about the situation you're entering. The Collective has been besieging this world for 93 days. Our last 3 relief attempts failed with casualty rates exceeding 70%. Their ships adapt to our weapons, their formations counter our tactics, and their forces seem to predict our movements." Stone nodded. "What about the civilian population, Commander?" 2.3 million inhabitants. They have approximately 2 weeks of supplies remaining. The Collective isn't trying to destroy the planet, Colonel. They're trying to capture it intact. This suggests they want the population alive for some purpose we don't understand. What kind of defenses does the planet have? Minimal. Kepler 442b is primarily an agricultural world. Their defense grid was overwhelmed in the first 6 hours of the siege. Stone turned to his senior staff, 12 officers representing the various special operations units under his command. Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, Delta Force, Marine Force Recon, and several other elite units that officially didn't exist. Each face showed the kind of calm professionalism that came from years of impossible missions. "Thoughts?" he asked simply. Master Sergeant Diana Walsh, a Green Beret with 16 years of experience in unconventional warfare, spoke first. "Sir, everything about this screams conventional thinking. The Council keeps trying to punch through with massive fleets, fighting the enemy on the enemy's terms. The Collective has had 3 months to study Council tactics and adapt their defenses accordingly. What do you recommend?" "We don't fight their strength, sir. We go around it, under it, through it. Find the weakness they don't even know they have." Commander Jake Harrison, a Navy SEAL who had led underwater infiltrations on 4 different worlds, leaned forward. "The Collective formation is designed to repel large-scale fleet actions, but I'm betting they're not prepared for a small unit infiltration. Get a few teams planet-side, establish contact with the locals, build an intelligence network." Major Lisa Park, a Delta Force operator who specialized in hostage rescue, added her analysis. "Sir, if they want the population alive, they can't use their heaviest weapons near population centers. That gives us room to maneuver. Classic hostage situation, but on a planetary scale." Stone processed their recommendations, feeling the familiar clarity that came before a complex operation. "Here's what we're going to do. Council Command expects us to attempt another conventional assault, and we're going to let them think that's exactly what we're planning. Harrison, I want your SEALs to conduct covert insertion using stealth pods. Get down to the planet, assess the situation, make contact with local resistance." "How many teams, sir?" "Start with 6 4-man teams. Different insertion points, different mission parameters. Walsh, your green berets are going to do what you do best. Once we have intelligence, I want you establishing relationships with the local population. Hearts and minds, Sergeant. Make them want to help us. Roger that, sir. What about the collective ground forces? That's where it gets interesting. According to Council intelligence, the collective has approximately 50,000 soldiers on the planet's surface. But they're concentrated around major population centers and strategic resources. Classic occupation deployment. Major Park raised an eyebrow. 50,000 soldiers to control 2 million civilians across an entire planet? That's spread pretty thin. Exactly. They're relying on their orbital superiority and advanced technology to maintain control. But they've never faced an enemy that operates in small, independent units. Stone turned to address his entire staff. Gentlemen and ladies, the Galactic Council has spent 2 years trying to fight the collective like it's a conventional military force. They're not? They're an occupation army that's gotten comfortable with overwhelming technological superiority. He activated a holographic display showing the planet's surface. The collective controls the major cities and spaceports. But there are thousands of small towns, farming communities, and industrial facilities scattered across 6 continents. The civilian population has been cooperating out of fear, not loyalty. That's our opening. Captain Rodriguez studied the display. Asymmetric warfare on a planetary scale. Turn the population into our intelligence network. Use their knowledge of local terrain and resources to conduct hit-and-run operations against isolated collective positions, while they're trying to figure out where we are and how we're operating. Their orbital defenses will be focused on watching for another conventional fleet assault, added Commander Harrison. Stone smiled. Which brings us to the best part of this plan. The Council is going to get us that conventional fleet. The room went quiet as his staff processed this statement. Finally, Master Sergeant Walsh spoke. Sir, you want to use the Council fleet as a distraction? Not exactly. I want to use their predictable tactics as misdirection. They're going to mount exactly the kind of assault the collective expects, while we conduct operations the collective has never seen before. 24 hours later. The first phase of Operation Unconventional Wisdom began. Council Command received detailed plans for a massive fleet assault, carefully designed to look like a sophisticated version of their previous failed attempts. At the same time, 12 stealth pods launched from hidden bays on human support ships, each carrying a 4-man SEAL team toward different points on Kepler 442b's surface. Lieutenant, Tom Mitchell's pod entered the planet's atmosphere over the southern continent, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to the collective sensors. As the pod descended through the clouds, Mitchell could see the alien landscape below, rolling hills covered in what looked like purple wheat. Small towns connected by narrow roads, and in the distance, the dark spires of a collective garrison. Landing in 30 seconds, whispered Petty Officer First Class Sarah Kim, the team's electronics specialist. Collective sensors are focused on the orbital approaches. We're clear. The pod touched down in a grove of alien trees that provided perfect concealment. Within minutes, Mitchell's team had buried the pod, established a camouflaged observation post, and begun monitoring local communications. Sir, Kim reported quietly. I'm picking up civilian transmissions. Looks like there's a resistance group operating about 15 kilometers north of here. They're using some kind of encrypted protocol, but it's not very sophisticated. Mitchell smiled grimly. The collective's advanced technology had made them overconfident. They weren't bothering to suppress civilian communications because they didn't consider the local population a threat. That was about to change. 3,000 kilometers away, Master Sergeant Walsh's Green Beret team was making contact with a farming community that had been cut off from collective forces for 2 weeks. The locals were hiding in underground storage facilities, terrified and running out of food. My name is Diana, Walsh told them in their own language, which she had learned during the 3-day journey to the system. I'm here to help, but I need to understand your situation first. The community's leader, an elderly man named Corvash, stared at the human soldiers in amazement. You came from the sky? But the dark ships control the sky. We came differently, Walsh replied. Tell me about the dark ships. How many soldiers do they have here? What are their patterns? When do they patrol? For the next 2 hours, Walsh and her team gathered intelligence that no Council military analyst had ever obtained. The collective forces followed rigid schedules, changed their guard rotations at predictable intervals, and relied heavily on automated sensors that could be fooled by simple countermeasures. More importantly, the civilian population had detailed knowledge of terrain, weather patterns, supply routes, and hidden locations that weren't marked on any military map. The Dark Soldiers come every 7 days, Corvash explained. They take food, count people, then leave. They don't speak to us, don't stay long. They act like we're not dangerous. Walsh smiled. That's going to be their first mistake. While the human teams established themselves planet-side, the Council fleet prepared for what they believed would be humanity's conventional assault. High Commander Zekthal studied the human battle plans, impressed despite himself at their sophistication. The humans have learned from our failures, he told his staff. Their plan accounts for the collective's adapta. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 1,000 different stars. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their designated sections, each species maintaining the careful protocols that had kept peace for over 3 centuries. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting the clicks, whistles, and roars of dozens of different languages into something approaching universal understanding. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Chun Wei, representing the newest member species to join the Council. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 18 months, and their presence still caused ripples of curiosity and barely concealed amusement throughout the chamber. The humans wished to contribute military forces to the Outer Rim Defense Coalition, announced Council Speaker Vexthan, his 4 arms gesturing in what his species considered a neutral manner. The translation didn't capture the subtle tone that suggested this was somehow amusing. They claim their forces, though small in number, possess unique capabilities. A wave of what could only be described as polite laughter swept through the chamber. The Krillian representative, whose species stood 12 feet tall and possessed natural armor plating, produced a sound like grinding stones. How many warriors do the humans offer? 10,000? 20,000? Ambassador Chun stood calmly, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that would have been immediately recognizable to any military observer as parade rest. We offer 12,000 soldiers for the initial deployment. The laughter became less polite. The Zephyrin delegation, whose species had perfected warfare across 3 different dimensions, buzzed in harmonics that their translators rendered as scoffing. 12,000? Their speaker clicked. The Krillians contribute 2 million warriors. The hegemony provides 5 million. Even the peaceful Altarians offer 50,000 soldiers. What can 12,000 humans possibly accomplish? Our forces include specialized units, Chun replied evenly. Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Rangers, and other special operations personnel. While our numbers may seem small, our effectiveness per soldier is significantly higher than standard galactic military doctrine would suggest. High Commander Zekthal of the Dominion military leaned forward in his hoverchair. His reptilian features twisted in what might have been curiosity or contempt. Special operations, he repeated, the translator struggling with the human term. You mean elite soldiers? Every species has elite soldiers, human. The Krillian Death Guards train from birth. The Zephyrin Void Hunters can phase through solid matter. The hegemony's battle saints are genetically enhanced to perfection. What makes your Green Berets special? The question hung in the air like a challenge. June had expected this. Earth's military leaders had spent months preparing him for exactly this moment, knowing that humanity's first military contribution to galactic affairs would be met with skepticism at best. Our special operations forces are trained differently, Chun explained. They don't just fight, they think, adapt, and overcome obstacles through unconventional means. A single Green Beret is trained to work with indigenous populations, to build relationships, to understand local conditions, and to achieve objectives that would require much larger conventional forces. The hegemony representative, a being that looked like it was carved from living marble, spoke in tones that resonated through the chamber. Understanding local conditions is for diplomats and merchants, not warriors. Warriors fight and conquer. Numbers and strength determine victory. With respect, Chun said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet confidence that made several council members lean forward. That thinking is exactly why the Outer Rim has been losing ground to the Void Collective for the past 2 years. A dangerous silence fell over the chamber. The Void Collective was a taboo subject in the Council, a source of embarrassment and growing concern. For 2 years, this mysterious enemy had been systematically conquering star systems along the galaxy's outer edge. And the Council's conventional military responses had been completely ineffective. Speaker Vexthen's translator crackled with static as he processed this human audacity. The Collective represents an unprecedented threat. Their technology is unlike anything we've encountered. Their tactics are alien even by our standards, which is exactly why conventional thinking hasn't worked, Chun continued. Your combined fleets have engaged them in 17 major battles. You've won 4, lost 13. Your casualty ratios are approaching 8-1 against you. The systems they've conquered haven't been liberated. They've been written off. High Commander Zekthal's claws scraped against his chair's armrests. The human speaks of things beyond his understanding. The Collective employs technologies that adapt to our weapons, tactics that defy logical military doctrine, and forces that seem to multiply rather than diminish with each engagement. That sounds like an unconventional enemy requiring unconventional solutions, Chun observed. Which brings us back to our 12,000 soldiers. They're trained specifically for unconventional warfare. The Krillian representative stood to his full imposing height. You speak as if 12,000 humans could accomplish what millions of our finest warriors cannot. This is arrogance beyond measure. Ambassador Shun smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and somehow that smile was more unsettling than any show of force could have been. Not arrogance, Commander, experience. Humans have been fighting unconventional wars against superior enemies for thousands of years. We've learned that victory doesn't always go to the biggest army, the strongest warriors, or the most advanced technology. Sometimes it goes to those who can think differently. Prove it, came a voice from the Altarian section. Their representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline form, pulsed with colors that their translator rendered as challenge. The Council has granted military authority to species with contributions of at least 50,000 soldiers. You offer 12,000. If you want that authority, prove these human special forces are worth 50,000 conventional soldiers. The chamber erupted in discussion as species debated among themselves. The challenge was unprecedented. No species had ever been asked to prove the worth of their military contribution, but then again, no species had ever offered such a small force while claiming such disproportionate capability. Speaker Vexthen called for order. The Altarian proposal has merit. The outer world of Kepler 442b has been under collective siege for 3 months. Our conventional forces cannot break through their defenses, nor can they successfully evacuate the population. If these human special forces can accomplish what our combined military might cannot, the Council will grant humanity full military authority despite the small numbers. Chin felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Kepler 442b was a death trap. The Council had lost 18,000 soldiers in the last attempt to break the siege. The planet's 2 million inhabitants were running out of supplies. And the Collective's adaptive defenses had turned every rescue attempt into a massacre, but he also knew that this was the moment humanity had been preparing for. Earth's military leadership had studied every available report on the Collective's tactics, capabilities, and patterns. More importantly, they'd studied the Council's failed attempts to counter them. How many soldiers would the Council normally assign to such a mission? Chun asked. High Commander Zekthal consulted a holographic display that materialized beside his chair. The last attempt used 45,000 soldiers from 7 different species. The attempt before that used 60,000. Both failed catastrophically. And you're asking 12,000 humans to succeed where over 100,000 Council soldiers have failed. That is the challenge, Speaker Vexton confirmed. Success grants humanity full military authority and the respect of the Council. Failure. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Failure would mean not just the deaths of 12,000 human soldiers, but the effective exclusion of humanity from galactic military affairs for generations to come. Chun was quiet for a long moment, appearing to consider the impossible odds. In reality, he was remembering the words of General Patricia Morrison, Earth's Joint Chiefs Chairman, spoken in a secure briefing room 6 months ago. The Council thinks in terms of overwhelming force and conventional battle lines. They've never faced an enemy that requires finesse, and they have no concept of asymmetric warfare. When they offer us an impossible mission, Chun, that's when we show them what impossible really means. We accept, Chun said simply. The chamber exploded in noise. Some species cheered at what they saw as entertaining human foolishness. Others buzzed with concern that they were about to witness genocide. A few, the more perceptive ones, wondered if there might be more to these humans than met the eye. Speaker Vexton raised all 4 arms for silence. Very well. The human military contribution will consist of 12,000 soldiers. They will have complete operational authority over the Kepler 442b mission. Success or failure will determine humanity's place in the galactic military structure. As the session adjourned and representatives began filing out, High Commander Zekthal approached Ambassador Chun. I fought in the last attempt to relieve Kepler 4.